representative for that area wants to get new legislation passed. You see State Rep Bill Romer there at the podium. Basically, it would be similar to an Amber Alert, but for an escaped convict, someone who's been convicted of a felony, calling this the Escaped Convict Alert Program. I'm going to suggest they're going to call it ECAP, but very similar to an Amber Alert. This would be for someone who is either in jail, a workhouse, a correctional institute, a prison, or awaiting trial of a felony. If they were to ever escape, there needs to be some sort of public system in place where you at home could get alerted. You would see it on your phone, very similar. You have to keep in mind there are several different types of alert systems already in Ohio. The Amber Alert, you have a Blue Alert. That's when an officer is shot in the line of duty, and if they're searching for that suspect, you'll get a Blue Alert for that. There are also Gray Alerts. That's for older Ohioans that may be missing and in danger. So this would be added to that system. Kind of makes sense. It's kind of one of those things that you say this kind of thing probably should already exist, but it doesn't. Let's take you live now to the news conference in front of the Summit County Jail.
Sure. What a deal.
Looks like we've got a delay. Maybe looks like one of the stations having a little problem with their system there, so we'll wait on this news conference to begin. It's going to be a bill introduced to enact sort of a version to the Ohio, a section added to the Ohio Revised Code, create the Escaped Convict Alert Program. Not going to read the entire verbiage, gets pretty dry as it is a submission to the Ohio Revised Code. It does say that the Escaped Convict Alert Program is created to aid in the identification, location of any person who was convicted of or pleaded guilty to a felony offense or was otherwise charged with the commission of a felony offense who has escaped from a jail, workhouse, correctional institution while incarcerated or awaiting adjudication of that felony offense. And again, it would use all of the statewide capacities that we already have. It would go through the Ohio State Highway Patrol. They're the ones who actually control when your phone goes off. That comes from the Ohio State Highway Patrol, and they can center that alert based on the area. We know this from covering Amber Alerts. If they think this is an issue where a child is in danger and has been taken somewhere throughout the state, they will go ahead and issue a statewide alert, and everybody's phone will go off. If it's for one particular area, maybe they're pinging the suspect's phone. Of course, if you're an inmate and you escape, you're probably not going to have a phone on you at the time. And so, again, not sure what the delay is here. We're going to listen in, see if we can figure out.
She doesn't even stand up and say, hey, I'm sorry, we'll do better.
Here's a promise I'm going to make you. In January, when I take office, I will always tell you.
It does appear that now one of the photographers has to get out a cable. Their wireless microphone doesn't seem to be working, so that's holding this up for everyone now as this gentleman tries to get their audio connected. Again, this seems to be one of those things that would be a no-brainer. I can't imagine there will be much of a pushback for State Rep Bill Romer to get this passed. We have seen this in the last year or two. There have been a handful of instances of felons walking away from whether it's a halfway house, as it's stated in the bill, a workhouse, and we've seen it happen. I can remember the Chardon shooter, if you remember that, probably within the last 5 years. The Chardon shooter actually escaped from the facility he was working at or was incarcerated in. And so that became an issue. And it's quite the balancing act there. But when he escaped, there was no alert system. And of course, he didn't make it far from the prison. In fact, I believe he was found in the sort of field in front of or to the side of the actual prison that he was at. But you can see where an alert would have been at least an easy way to let the public know, including the people in Chardon, that he had escaped. We didn't have that system. According to this bill, we may have it soon. It looks like we're about to start. Let's get underway.
Good morning, everyone. I'm State Representative Bill Romer, and I'm here to discuss my bill that was just dropped today at the Ohio State House that will keep residents, constituents, families across Ohio safer. What we're here today to discuss is our bill that will require a modified Amber Alert process when there are escaped felons that escape from jail. Now, we talk about escapes from jail, and you think about Andy Dufresne in Shawshank Redemption spending 20 years with a little hammer. That's not what happens. There's multiple ways that we can have felons escape in Ohio, and we need to make sure that the residents are notified and that there's proper communication also to other law enforcement agencies. If you have somebody that is released inadvertently, that's considered an escape. In transport, if somebody's being transported and escapes, that's an escape. If you have somebody that's on a work release program as a convicted felon, that would be considered an escape. And we should have notification to families in the area. As part of what we're doing here, when a person is charged with or convicted of a felony and escapes from jail relative to those parameters I just discussed, there would have to be notifications that are made. Each law enforcement agency would be notified of that escape so that the Ohio Highway Patrol and other agencies are able to assist in the capture. The second thing we want to see is we want to see notifications to the public. And I want to offer just a little bit of background as to why we're all standing here. And I'm going to introduce these gentlemen in just a second. About 6 weeks ago, I received a call from a friend who said, "Bill, you'll never believe it. There's an escaped felon on your street in Richfield." I asked how they knew. They said there's a service called Nixle, and the Richfield police work with Nixle to then notify residents that have signed up for Nixle alerts. That got me thinking, why isn't this done on a more universal basis? That's very important information, because what I immediately did is I called my wife. I said, make sure you have all the doors and windows locked, the garage door down. And then I called a family immediately across the street from where that was occurring who has a number of children that were playing in the woods on a daily basis to make sure that they were safe. But we need to make sure that residents and families are considered safe. What we would do is, and I said modified Amber Alert, we want to make sure that it's limited to the general geographic area of the escape. If you're in Akron, Ohio, we don't want to necessarily have alerts go down to Cincinnati, because then they don't become as valuable. What we're going to do is we're going to look at working with the Attorney General's office to use the systems that we now have. Right now in Ohio, we have something called the Blue Alert. What the Blue Alert is triggered when there is a law enforcement officer who is seriously injured or unfortunately killed. Those notifications go out when there can be a great description of the person that committed the crime, and there's notifications that go out to each of the appropriate law enforcement agencies. Additionally, you'll see things like signs on highways saying escaped prisoner at large, don't pick anyone up. We've seen all those signs on the interstates. You're going to see other things, Facebook notifications, group notifications, and we want to go one step further with this and make sure that those notifications also go out to individuals within the county where the escape occurred. With that, what I want to do is talk a little bit more about the background. I had this original idea relative to Nixle and the escapees But then I happened to talk to Shane Barker. And the reason Shane is here is Shane was a 25-year employee of the Sheriff's Department. He retired as captain, and he and I first met, I believe it was in 2010, when he gave me a tour of the jail. Shane was the administrative captain of the Summit County Jail, so he has the expertise. Whenever I pass a bill, I'm not the expert, but I know who to talk to, who are the experts. The other gentleman I have standing here is Kevin Coughlin, and Kevin served at the State House for multiple terms in the Ohio Senate and multiple terms in the Ohio House. But the reason we reached out to Kevin is he's considered the father of the Amber Alert in Ohio. In 2001, he introduced the legislation that now has become the Amber Alert system that we now have. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Shane Barker, who can go through in a little more detail what we're looking to do here. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. I appreciate it. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for coming. I appreciate it. Good morning, everybody. My name is Shane Barker, and I'm a retired captain with the Summit County Sheriff's Office. My last 10 years of my career, I ran this facility. So I reached out to Representative Romer and Kevin Coughlin, and I asked them for help. How can we help with the escapes that are going on? And more importantly, not the escapes that are going on, but they're not being reported. And Bill got a hold of me, being the great state rep that he is, and he says, let's enhance the Amber Alert. We have a mechanism in place. Let's use that and start using that to notify our citizens. As a society, we expect that when somebody is put into jail, that they are released knowingly through the court system. And when that does not happen, Ohio State Highway Patrol has to know, the media has to know, more importantly, the residents have to know, and we don't know about that. This bill that he's introduced, and thank you again for introducing that, goes a long way to getting us to notifications to be made. So I'd like to also introduce Kevin. He has a few words to say too.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Shane. Thanks, Representative Romer, for introducing this bill. As it was mentioned, I introduced and passed the legislation in 2001 that required the state of Ohio to implement a Amber Alert program. It's a program that's got a lot of fathers, mostly law enforcement, who collaborated with the state to come up with a system that works. And as Bill said, it's got currently 3 uses. When we originally created the Amber Alert, it was to facilitate the safe return of missing children, abducted children. And the record has been very, very good in that regard. Over the years, it's been expanded to include missing adults, particularly senior citizens who could be in danger. And of course, he mentioned the Blue program, where we have an officer that's been injured or killed, and we have a dangerous suspect out on the loose. The idea is to include millions of Ohioans in the search for a missing person, and to use that intelligence for law enforcement to be able to retrieve that person. Well, last year alone, in 2023, with regard to missing children, there were 13 Amber Alerts issued in the state of Ohio for 17 kids. 16 of them were quickly returned safely. 1 is still missing. So this is a program that is effective. It has an impact. There are standards in place to make sure it doesn't get abused. If you cry wolf too much, people don't believe it, and it loses its effectiveness. But I will tell you, when Bill said he was going to introduce this bill, I said this is an absolutely legitimate and very good use, because you have 2 components here: the return of people who have escaped, and we have a system that works, and number 2, the protection of our communities with potentially dangerous felons that have escaped the facility in our neighborhoods. And again, just as it does with the existing programs, you would be asking the public to help you with the search, and that intelligence is so important for law enforcement to do their job. So thank you, Bill, for introducing the bill. Thank you, Shane, for getting with Bill and putting this issue on his radar screen.
And with that, we'll open it up for questions.
I have a question for Representative Romer. I know that you spoke to people regarding the need for this bill, but tell me, there were at least 4 escaped inmates this year alone. We obviously reported on it. What did you think after watching our reports, especially the one about the convict who escaped 2 years ago, is still on the loose, and the sheriff's office seemed to intentionally not advise the public about it?
Well, I would say that one of the main tenets of the bill is that there has to be notification from whomever the jailer is to the appropriate law enforcement agencies. That's the first thing that has to happen, is that notification, because now you've got the Ohio Highway Patrol, the Sheriff's Office, local police, Akron Police in this case, that are now assisting in returning that individual. What we did also is we made sure that we narrowly crafted the bill in that we want to make sure it's only for escaped felons or those that are waiting felony charges. Because right across the street from us is community-based corrections. If somebody doesn't show up at 1 o'clock, who is a low-level, a minor misdemeanor drug offender, we're not going to use the alert system for that. We're going to make sure that it's narrowly crafted and used appropriately. And the reporting that occurred is one of the things that provided great background into what we're doing here on this bill.
More specifically, I guess I'm asking about what is your view on how the sheriff has handled the failure of notifications to go out to the public? When their own policies and procedures say that they have to do this, and in many cases they have to notify the state. The state is investigating them on one of the cases.
Yes. Relative to notification, the bill requires notification. So that would be a violation of the bill if that notification doesn't occur. I think what this does is this gives teeth to that requires notification from whomever it is, whether it's the Summit County Sheriff or somebody in Hardin County. That notification has to occur so that that person is returned and our public is kept safe.
Is this like an Amber Alert where papers have to be filled out and my phone will go off saying that there's somebody missing? Or do I have to sign up through a separate agency to receive these alerts?
We would want this to be considered comparable to an Amber Alert, but on a much less broad scale. Because I know that when people get Amber Alerts, and like I said, if you're in Akron and you get an Amber Alert in Cincinnati, you turn that off immediately. But if you're in Summit County, that would be very important. And the idea that Nixle provides this service as a for-profit company working with local communities, I think we can do even better to provide even broader coverage. Yes,
Can I just say something real quick? It's important to know that the Amber Alert system is extremely smart. And you're able to very, in a detailed way, target where you're sending an Amber Alert. So, for instance, if you have, in this case, hypothetically, if you have an inmate that has escaped who's danger, and law enforcement knows, for instance, based on what they're hearing, that they're in this car and they're heading in this direction or toward these neighborhoods, you can issue an Amber Alert in that direction and in those neighborhoods and leave everybody else alone so that you're not intruding on people's phones and lives, but you're hitting the folks that could be potentially impacted and helpful in the return.
So this is not something that somebody has to sign up for. This is something just like an Amber where it's automatically going to be sent to my phone.
One more question.
Yeah.
What is, in a nutshell, what is the next step in getting this legislation passed, and what do you think your chances are of getting support?
Well, great question. As I mentioned, we dropped the bill today, meaning my legislative aide has it over at the clerk's office. It then goes through something called non-voting, and it's assigned a bill number. From there, it's assigned to a committee, and then we start the committee process. This is already October, so we're going to have to work very, very diligently to get this through that process, through the Senate, and then onto the governor's desk. If we don't get it done this General Assembly, we're going to get it done next General Assembly, because this is something that's very, very important to keep everybody safe and to return those individuals who should be incarcerated.
Were you surprised when you heard about the escaped inmates and no notifications going out?
I was very surprised. Like I said, I originally got the idea when I received through a friend a Nixle notification of an escaped felon on my own street. And then seeing the additional reports out there, that really spurred us to do this bill.
If I could just respond to your question, Mr. Mason. So the escapes that you referenced, the four, at least four this year we know that were not reported to the State Highway Patrol, that's already statutorily required, as I know you know from reporting, I've watched it. And the one from 2022, a full 2 years ago, that's more disturbing because a message was put out from the command staff not to let the media know. Think about that. They knew this person. When we don't, as Bill said earlier, the mechanism of escape is not what we're talking about. When somebody is supposed to be in jail and they're supposed to be confined, they need to be released knowingly. And when they're not, all of us, I have a right to know when that inmate has escaped. And this person has been on the loose for 2 years. It's already a requirement. Ohio State Highway Patrol should have known. You folks should have known. The Beacon Journal should have known. And those notifications wasn't just failed, they were not made purposely. So I hope that answers that question.
And especially, he's a violent offender.
Yes. I mean, it's stunning to me that something like that, with the technology that we have, and thank you guys for taking the mechanism that we have already and enhancing it so that we wouldn't, out of all the 88 counties, we have to land in Summit County because notifications aren't being made.
And since you're up there talking, what do you think about your opponent, Sheriff Fothery's decision not to address the issue or speak to the media about this after we uncovered it?
I think you'd probably have to address that question to her. I can't speak for her. But can I take any other questions I can take? I don't want to steal any. Yes, sir.
So on an Amber Alert, you can turn your Amber Alerts off so you won't get it. Is this something that you can turn off?
I would think that through the phones, the phone companies, you can, or the whatever phone you have, you can do that. Yes. Yeah.
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 The answer to that is this would be very comparable to the Amber Alert, so you could turn the Amber Alert off, but you would still be able to see those on TV or through print media or radio or however that communication occurs. Any other questions? With that, thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Dan DeRose with 19 News. You've been watching a news conference from in front of the Summit County Jail down in Akron. This idea of an Amber Alert style system to alert the public, and not just the public, but we're seeing and through our Mike Mason's reporting that it's not even shared with fellow police departments and neighboring counties when there is an escaped felon. And so finally something potentially going to get on the books, just introduced in Columbus today, hasn't even been given a bill number at this point, and it'll have to work its way through. Can't imagine this will get a lot of blowback. This seems to be a very common sense kind of issue. If there's an escaped felon in your area, you should probably get some sort of notification on your phone, much like you do in Amber Alert. We'll have a complete wrap-up of this announcement and all of the day's news. Our 11 o'clock news has a half hour left on CW43. And don't forget about our noon news on Channel 19. Until then, I'm Dan DeRose with 19. Have a great afternoon.
19 News is everywhere. Download our CTV apps and follow us on social media @Cleveland 19 News.